What would you do if you spent years saving money to give your parents a secure retirement, only to find out they gave it all away to your brother so he could buy a luxury mansion? My name is Evelyn Evie Lancaster, and I never thought I'd be the kind of person posting on Reddit about family betrayal. But here I am, because I still can't wrap my head around what happened. I'm 33 years old, a senior software engineer in Seattle, and for years, I've been supporting my parents financially. Every month, I sent them money, helped with their bills, and even built a retirement fund for them because I wanted them to have the peace of mind they had never been able to afford. But one day, I checked the account and saw that every last cent, $198,000, was gone. Not because of a medical emergency, not because they were scammed. No, they willingly gave it all away to my younger brother, Jason, so he and his wife could buy a multi-million-dollar home in Arizona. And when I confronted them, they weren't even sorry. They looked at me like I was the one who had betrayed them. I posted this on /true off my chest because I need to get this off my chest. I need to understand how the people who raised me could do this. This is a real story found on one of Reddit's most popular subreddits, r/true off my chest, a community with tens of thousands of members sharing their deepest personal experiences. And if you want to hear more jaw-dropping real-life stories like this, don't forget to follow Reddit True Vault. Your support means everything. I grew up knowing one thing for certain. I would never be the priority in my family. My parents, Richard and Margaret Lancaster, were the kind of people who believed in tradition, the kind where sons carried the family name and daughters were expected to be supportive, but never outshine their brothers. And in our household, Jason, my younger brother by 4 years, wasn't just the golden child. He was the sun, the moon, and the stars in my parents' world. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, in a house where my worth was measured by how well I could support the men around me. My father had a very clear-cut view of the world. Men were meant to be providers. Women were meant to be caregivers. I remember him sitting at the dinner table, his voice firm as he lectured about how a woman's job is to raise a family, not chase a paycheck. My mother, once an ambitious woman who dreamed of becoming a writer, had long since resigned herself to this belief. By the time I was a teenager, she wasn't just agreeing with my father. She was enforcing his rules. Jason was the opposite of me in every way. While I buried my nose in books, obsessed with science and computers, Jason coasted through life on a wave of undeserved praise. He was charming, in that careless way that some people mistake for confidence. He was the kid who could forget his homework and still sweet-talk a teacher into giving him extra credit. The one who got away with skipping chores, breaking curfew, and treating life like it owed him something. And my parents? They adored him for it. Every resource in our family was funneled into Jason's comfort. When I was 16, I took a job shelving books at the local library, saving up every paycheck so I could buy my first laptop for programming. Jason, at 14, casually mentioned wanting an Xbox, and it was under the Christmas tree 2 weeks later. When my glasses broke, I had to wait months for a replacement because my dad's insurance plan didn't cover it yet. But when Jason decided he wanted contact lenses because glasses weren't cool, my mom withdrew money from their savings, no hesitation. College only made the divide clearer. I had always known that I would be on my own when it came to paying for school. My father made it clear early on. We're saving for Jason's future. I took out loans, worked part-time, and scraped by with scholarships. Jason, meanwhile, bounced between 3 different universities, never lasting more than a semester at each, because he hadn't found his calling yet. Each time he flunked out, my parents were there with a fresh check and a new excuse. College isn't for everyone, they'd say, as if the problem wasn't that Jason refused to put in effort. But through it all, I never resented them. I told myself that if I worked hard enough, if I became successful enough, I could still take care of them. That one day, they would see me, really see me, and be proud. I spent years chasing that validation. I graduated with a degree in computer science, landed my first job at a tech firm in Seattle, and worked my way up the ladder. I was making good money, more than enough to support myself and start saving for the future. But instead of building a future just for me, I started putting aside money for my parents. Every month, I sent them money for bills. Every year, I deposited more into a separate account, one meant to secure their retirement, so they wouldn't have to worry when they got older. I wanted them to be safe, comfortable, to never feel like they had to struggle. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought they would appreciate it. I had no idea what was coming. For most of my life, I had told myself one thing. If I worked hard enough, if I was successful enough, I could take care of my parents. I could make their lives easier, ensure they had a comfortable retirement, and maybe, just maybe, earn their love and respect in the process. It wasn't that I thought they didn't love me. I knew, in their own way, they cared. But love in our house had always been conditional. Love was something Jason received freely, without having to work for it. For me, love came with expectations. Be responsible, be strong, be the one who could handle things on her own. I had spent my childhood fighting for their approval. I had spent my teenage years proving I was capable. And by the time I was in my 30s, with a stable career and a six-figure salary, I thought I had finally done enough to deserve their recognition. So I started planning for their future. By then, I was living in Seattle, working as a senior software engineer. My condo was modest, nothing too flashy, but it was mine. I had savings, investments, and for the first time in my life, financial security. But instead of using that money to upgrade my own lifestyle, I put my focus on my parents. I opened a savings account just for them. Every month, without fail, I deposited $2,000. It wasn't for bills or emergencies. I had already been covering those whenever they needed help. This was their retirement fund, money they could rely on when my father's back finally gave out from decades of construction work, or when my mother wanted to retire from teaching. I pictured them in a cozy home, maybe a little cottage somewhere quiet. No more financial stress, no more scraping by on dad's declining health or mom's overworked schedule. I imagined Christmases where they wouldn't have to worry about affording gifts, or birthdays where they could finally treat themselves without guilt. I wanted to give them the peace they had never had. I believed, wholeheartedly, that they deserved it. I told myself that none of it mattered, that Jason's failures, his reckless spending, his complete inability to be an adult, weren't my problem. That if I worked hard enough, I could compensate for all of it. It wasn't until Vanessa entered the picture that I realized how naive I had been. The first time I met Vanessa Sinclair, she was perched on my parents' couch like she had been born there, sipping iced coffee out of a designer cup with perfectly manicured nails. She was beautiful in a carefully curated way. Long dark hair in loose waves, expensive perfume that lingered in the air, and an effortless confidence that immediately put me on edge. Something about her didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the way she smiled too much, too sweetly, as if every expression was rehearsed. Or the way she spoke about Jason, not like a woman in love, but like someone talking about an investment that hadn't quite paid off yet. I could tell, instantly, that she knew exactly what kind of man she was marrying. And she had decided it didn't matter. She wasn't just okay with Jason's entitlement. She encouraged it. My parents adored her. Mom gushed over her classy style, how she carried herself like a real lady. Dad admired how she spoke about building a future, like she was someone who actually had plans beyond leeching off of other people. And Jason? He looked at her like she had personally plucked him out of mediocrity and set him on a pedestal. I had seen this before. Jason had always been drawn to people who enabled his worst instincts. He had never been with someone who challenged him to be better. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a cheerleader, someone who would tell him he was special without ever making him prove it. And Vanessa? She was more than happy to play the role. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I told myself that maybe I was being too critical, that my gut reaction wasn't fair. But then she started asking questions. Not about me, not about my job, my life, or anything that actually mattered. No, her interest was singularly focused on one thing: money. She asked about my parents' finances in casual conversation, always phrased in a way that made it seem innocent. Were they planning for retirement? Did they have any debts? How much were they paying on their mortgage? Had they thought about downsizing? It didn't take long for me to realize what she was doing. She was assessing them, figuring out what resources they had, what assets could be used, and more importantly, how much Jason stood to gain from them. And my parents? They didn't see it. They were too blinded by the idea of Jason finally settling down, finally starting a family, finally being the son they had always wanted him to be. They thought Vanessa was the answer. I knew she was the beginning of something much worse. I didn't think much about Vanessa at first. She was just another person passing through Jason's life, another woman caught up in his ability to charm his way into relationships without offering much in return. But unlike his past girlfriends, Vanessa wasn't content with Jason being a deadbeat. She had ambitions, big ones. I didn't see it right away, though. The first real clue came from my mother. It was during one of our usual phone calls, the kind where I asked about their week and listened to the same stories about their neighbors, my father's health, and Jason's latest big plans. But this time, there was something different. Mom sounded distracted, almost hesitant. She mentioned, offhandedly, that Jason and Vanessa had been looking at houses. I paused. Houses? Jason could barely afford to pay rent. He had no savings, no steady job, no credit that hadn't already been destroyed by years of late payments and impulsive spending. The idea of him buying a house was laughable. Mom must have sensed my skepticism because she quickly added, "Well, Vanessa thinks it's time for them to settle down. She wants a place of their own." That set off alarm bells, not because wanting a house was unusual, but because of how my mother phrased it. Vanessa wanted a house, not Jason. Vanessa had always struck me as someone who wanted more out of life. There was nothing wrong with that. But the way she went about it, the way she maneuvered conversations, the way she steered Jason, made me uneasy. I didn't think much of it until, a few weeks later, my Aunt Helen called. Helen wasn't the type to gossip. If anything, she actively avoided family drama. So when she called me out of nowhere and asked, "Have you heard what your parents are thinking of doing?" I knew something was wrong. Apparently, Jason had been visiting my parents a lot more often lately. More specifically, he and Vanessa had been dropping hints about how unfair life had been to them. How they were trying to build a future, but everything was stacked against them. How they wanted a fresh start in a nicer neighborhood, but the financial system was designed to keep people like them trapped. It wasn't just casual complaints. Vanessa had been planting seeds. Little comments about how Jason deserved a home of his own. How all his friends were buying houses and starting families, while he was still struggling to get ahead. How Jason had always been the one who needed more support because he wasn't as naturally lucky as me. She played on every insecurity my father had. She knew exactly what she was doing. My dad had always been the kind of man who believed in providing. In his mind, a real father made sure his son had everything he needed. And Vanessa? She made sure he felt like he had failed in that duty. Aunt Helen told me she had overheard a conversation between my father and Vanessa at a family gathering. She didn't catch all of it, but the parts she did hear made her stomach turn. Vanessa had been telling him how hard it was for Jason to see me thriving while he struggled. How embarrassing it must be for a father to watch his son fall so far behind. And the worst part? My dad had agreed. He had actually said, maybe I should have done more for him. Helen was livid. She had tried to remind him that I had done everything on my own, that Jason had been given every opportunity and squandered them all. But Dad had just shaken his head, like it was already decided. Like he was already convinced that helping Jason was the right thing to do. That was when it clicked. Vanessa wasn't just ambitious. She was relentless. She had grown up poor, always looking at wealth from the outside. She wasn't just marrying Jason because she loved him. She was marrying into an opportunity, and she had found the perfect way to manipulate my parents into giving her exactly what she wanted. A house, a lifestyle, a future built on someone else's sacrifice, and they were going to let her have it. I don't even remember how I got home after finding out. I just remember sitting in my car, staring at the dashboard, my entire body frozen in disbelief. It was like my brain refused to process what I had just heard. $198,000. Gone. The money I had been saving for them for years. The money I had been setting aside so they wouldn't have to worry in their old age. The money that represented every skipped vacation, every hand-me-down car I drove, every time I told myself, this is worth it. They deserve this. And they just gave it away. Not because they were in trouble. Not because they needed it. Because Jason and Vanessa wanted a house. It wasn't even a regular house. It was a damn luxury home in Scottsdale, Arizona, complete with a pool, a marble foyer, and a backyard big enough to host influencer-style parties. A house so far removed from the reality of what they could afford that the mere thought of them living there felt like a twisted joke. I wish I could say I found out in some dramatic way, some big confrontation where I caught them red-handed. But the truth is, I wasn't even supposed to know. My mother let it slip. She had been acting strange for weeks, dodging my calls, giving vague answers whenever I asked about their finances. I should have pressed harder. I should have known something was wrong, but I didn't. I let myself believe that maybe she was just stressed. That maybe, for once, things weren't about Jason. Then, one night, I got a text from Aunt Helen. She didn't say much, just that I should call my mother, that she was worried, that something had happened. So I did, and when she picked up, her voice was already shaking. She didn't mean to tell me. I could hear it in the way she stumbled over her words, in the way she kept stopping mid-sentence like she was trying to decide if she should just hang up instead. But eventually, it came out. My father had emptied the retirement fund. He had transferred the money to Jason weeks ago. I couldn't breathe. My head was spinning, my hands gripping the edge of my desk, so hard my knuckles turned white. Why? I remember asking. And that's when she really broke down. Because she had tried to stop him. She had fought him on it, told him it was a terrible idea, told him that it wasn't their money to give. But he hadn't listened. He told her I wouldn't care, that I had plenty of money and didn't need it anyway. That Jason deserved this, that it was the least they could do for their son. I don't remember the rest of the conversation. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember throwing my phone across the room so hard it left a dent in the wall. But I remember the way my heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. I had spent my entire life trying to prove to them that I was worth loving, that I was worth caring about. And in one decision, one selfish, thoughtless, cruel decision, they had shown me exactly where I stood. I wasn't their child. I was their bank account. And when I confronted my father the next day, he didn't even try to deny it. He looked me right in the eyes and told me I was being dramatic, that I was selfish for making a big deal out of this, that Jason needed it more than I did, that I should be happy to help my family. Happy. I was supposed to be happy that they had stolen from me. Happy that the years I spent sacrificing for them meant nothing. Happy that my father, my own father, had no problem looking me in the face and telling me that Jason's happiness was worth more than mine. I don't even know how long I stood there, staring at him, waiting for something, anything, that would make this hurt less. A shred of remorse. A sign that he understood what he had done. But there was nothing, just disappointment. Not his disappointment in himself, his disappointment in me. Because in his eyes, I was the problem. I was the selfish one. I was the one causing unnecessary drama. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. But I wasn't okay. I sat in my car for hours, scrolling through Reddit, looking for stories, any stories, of people who had been through something like this. People who understood what it felt like to have your own family betray you in a way that felt so personal, so deep, that it shattered everything you thought you knew about them. And that's when I realized something. There were thousands of stories like mine. Thousands of people who had given everything to their families, only to be treated like nothing more than a resource. I wasn't alone. And for the first time in my life, I decided that I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. They had made their choice. Now they had to live with it. I stopped answering my mother's calls after that night. Not because I wanted to hurt her. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I had nothing left to say. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger would have been easier. I was just done. I didn't block her. I didn't send any dramatic final messages. I just let the silence settle. And for a while, it worked. I buried myself in work. I focused on my own life. And most importantly, I stopped thinking about them. But just because I was done with them didn't mean they were done with me. The first time I heard about Jason and Vanessa's problems, it was from my aunt. She called me out of the blue, her voice tight with something that sounded suspiciously like schadenfreude. "They're drowning, Evie." I almost hung up the phone. I didn't want to know. I didn't care. But she kept talking, and despite myself, I listened. Jason and Vanessa had moved into their dream home. All right. The grand entrance, the high ceilings, the luxury finishes. It was everything Vanessa had ever wanted. For 3 months, they lived like royalty. Vanessa threw lavish dinner parties, posting filtered Instagram stories with captions like manifesting abundance. Jason took up golf, because apparently, that's what men with money did. They spent without thinking. And then the bills came. The mortgage, the HOA fees, the utilities. Vanessa refused to cut back. She insisted they had to maintain appearances, so she took out credit cards. Jason, meanwhile, was struggling at work. He had never been a particularly good employee, but now, with a massive mortgage looming over him, the pressure got to him. He started making reckless sales pitches, promising clients things he couldn't deliver. Complaints piled up. And then, one day, he lost his job. No severance. No backup plan. They had been living paycheck to paycheck, and now there was nothing. Vanessa panicked. She maxed out their cards, trying to keep up with their lifestyle. She convinced Jason to take out a personal loan, telling him that something would come up. Something did. A foreclosure notice. The bank was preparing to take the house. And suddenly, the people who had laughed in my face, who had called me selfish, who had spent nearly $200,000 of my money without a second thought, now they were desperate. Now they were the ones begging. And this time, it wasn't just Jason and Vanessa. It was my mother. She showed up at my doorstep one evening, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. And then she said it. "They're going to lose the house, Evie." Her voice cracked, but I felt nothing. "They need help," she continued. "They have nowhere else to turn." I almost laughed. Nowhere else to turn? What did she think I had when they stole from me? I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "That's not my problem." She flinched, like she hadn't expected me to say it out loud. I could see the wheels turning in her head, See her reaching for the same guilt-tripping tactics she had used all my life. But then something shifted. For the first time, I saw something other than blind devotion in her eyes. I saw regret. Not just regret for Jason's situation, but regret for how she had treated me. She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were wrong, Evie." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I didn't say anything, because for the first time in my life, my mother was admitting she had chosen wrong. She was admitting Jason had been a mistake. She was admitting she had failed me. And yet, it didn't change anything. I took a slow breath, steadying myself before I spoke. "You chose him." The silence stretched between us. And then, for the first time since this nightmare began, she didn't deny it. She just nodded. And then she walked away. I stood there for a long time after she left, staring at the empty street, feeling something inside me finally settle. I had spent my whole life trying to earn their love. Now, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought once I turned my back on them, once I finally stopped letting them drain me dry, they'd find another way. I was wrong. For a while, I heard nothing. I didn't check in. I didn't ask for updates. And honestly, I didn't care. But silence doesn't mean peace. It just means the storm is gathering. It was my aunt who broke the news. She called me late one night, her voice hesitant, like she didn't know whether she should be telling me any of this. "I know you don't want to hear about them, Evie," she said. "But I thought you should know. Jason and Vanessa were gone. Not just struggling. Not just behind on payments. Gone. The house had been sold. The luxury SUV, gone. The furniture, the appliances, everything had been liquidated in a matter of weeks. They had taken what little cash they could get and vanished into the night. No forwarding address. No explanations. Just silence. I almost laughed when I heard it. It wasn't funny, not really. But after everything, after stealing my money, after gaslighting me into thinking I was the selfish one, after watching my parents throw away their future for Jason, he had done what he always did. He had run. And for the first time, my parents were the ones left behind to clean up the mess. Richard refused to believe it at first. He drove to Scottsdale, knocked on the door of a house that no longer belonged to his son. He demanded answers from the new homeowners, from the real estate agents, from the banks. But Jason had covered his tracks well. There was nothing left. No savings. No backup plan. Just debt. And reality hit them like a freight train. Margaret was the first to break. She had spent months defending Jason, justifying every terrible decision he made. She had told herself it wasn't his fault, that he was just lost, that he would figure it out. But there was no justifying this. Her son had abandoned them, vanished without so much as a goodbye. And now, for the first time in her life, she had to face a truth she had spent years avoiding. Jason had never cared about them. Not the way they had cared about him. Not the way I had cared. Richard, of course, reacted differently. Denial. Anger. Blame. He refused to see what was right in front of him. He insisted Jason would come back, that there had to be some explanation, that I had somehow driven him away by refusing to help. He called me, leaving furious voicemails about family and loyalty and how I had turned my back on my own blood. I never responded, because I had spent my entire life listening to that same speech, and I wasn't listening anymore. It took months for my mother to gather the courage to reach out again. This time, there was no guilt tripping, no demands, just a quiet, broken, "I don't know what to do." And for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than anger toward her. I felt pity, because she had finally realized the truth. She had given up everything for Jason, and in return, he had given her nothing. No security, no gratitude, no love, just empty promises and an empty house. But pity wasn't enough to change what had already been done. I listened as she told me how bad things had gotten, how my father's back problems had worsened, how they were struggling to keep up with medical bills, utilities, food. How, for the first time, she understood why I had walked away. But that was the thing about consequences. They don't disappear just because you finally understand them. I took a deep breath before I answered. "I told you what would happen." She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just let out a shaky breath and whispered, "I know." And for the first time in my life, she actually meant it. It had been a year since I last spoke to my mother. A year since I walked away. Since I cut off their financial support. Since I told myself I was done. I thought that was the end of it. But guilt has a way of lingering, even when logic tells you that you did the right thing. Some nights, I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had been too harsh. If I should have tried harder to make them see reason before everything fell apart. Then I'd remember the way my father had dismissed me, the way he had made me feel like an outsider in my own family, the way they had taken what I worked for and handed it to Jason like it was nothing. I had learned to push those thoughts away, until one evening, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was spam, but something made me answer. The voice on the other end was weak, hesitant, the kind of voice that carried the weight of regret. It took me a second to even register who it was. My mother, the last person I expected to hear from. The hesitation in her tone was something I had never heard before. There was no forced warmth, no attempt to guilt trip me, just a quiet, almost broken plea. She needed to see me. Everything in me screamed to say no, to hang up, to keep moving forward with my life. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself asking where. Walking into the cafe, I almost didn't recognize her. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the mother I had grown up with. She looked smaller, frilier. The confident posture she always carried was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, something that almost looked like shame. Her hair, once always neatly styled, was streaked with more gray than I remembered. Her hands, usually steady and purposeful, trembled slightly as she gripped her coffee cup. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, with a quiet exhale, she finally admitted the truth. Richard was sick. He had been sick for months. His back had gotten worse, to the point where he could barely stand. Without insurance, they had no way to afford treatment. They had lost the house. They had lost everything. Now, they were surviving in a rental, but even that was slipping away. The money was gone. The security they once had was gone. For the first time, she admitted it. Everything they had done, everything they had sacrificed for Jason, had led them here. She said it with no excuses, no defensiveness, no attempt to justify it. Just the raw, ugly truth. For the first time in my life, my mother wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking me to fix things. She was asking for a second chance. A chance to prove that she had changed. A chance to prove that she could be better. Sitting there, I let the silence stretch between us. A year ago, I had walked away, thinking that nothing would ever make them see the damage they had done. And yet, here she was. For the first time, she wasn't blaming me. For the first time, she wasn't making excuses. She was simply acknowledging the truth. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the weight of it all settle. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet but firm. She didn't deserve my help. She had made her choices. She had chosen Jason over me, time and time again. She had spent years dismissing my efforts, ignoring my sacrifices, making me feel like an outsider in my own family. But even as I said it, I knew I wouldn't walk away this time. I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't ready to welcome her back into my life. But I also couldn't ignore the fact that, for the first time, she was willing to face what she had done. So I set my terms. I would help her get through this. Just enough to make sure she and my father wouldn't end up on the street. Just enough to make sure his medical care was covered. But this wouldn't be like before. There would be no monthly support. No more blank checks. This time, they would have to stand on their own. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just nodded, gripping her coffee cup so tightly her knuckles turned white. For the first time, she truly understood that things had changed, that this wasn't just another bailout, that this was her last chance. She whispered her thanks, her voice breaking. I didn't respond, because I wasn't sure if I had truly forgiven her. But maybe, just maybe, this was a start. There are things in life that no amount of time can fully repair. Trust, once shattered, doesn't simply return overnight. I don't know if my parents and I can ever rebuild what we lost. And honestly, I've stopped trying to force something that was never mine to hold on to in the first place. For years, I believed that if I worked hard enough, if I gave enough, if I sacrificed enough, I could earn their love and respect. But love isn't something you should have to earn. Respect isn't something that should only flow one way. Family should be about love and respect, not just obligation, not just duty. And if there's one lesson I've learned, it's that sometimes you have to walk away, even from those you love. It took me years to understand that choosing myself wasn't selfish, that setting boundaries wasn't cruel, that refusing to be taken advantage of didn't make me a bad daughter. I don't regret cutting them off when I did. I don't regret putting myself first. And if they truly want to change, if they truly want to rebuild something with me, then this time, I won't be the one making all the effort. This story was originally shared on r/TrueOffMyChest, a well-known subreddit with tens of thousands of members who discuss real-life betrayals like this. It's a reminder that sometimes, the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. What would you do if your own family betrayed you like this? Would you give them a second chance, or would you walk away for good? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more shocking real-life stories, don't forget to follow Reddit TrueVault for more.